My husband looked me dead in the eyes and told me, "Not tonight or any night." I laughed at first, thinking he was joking. But he wasn't. That night, something inside me broke. And when he walked away, I made the biggest mistake of my life. A mistake that destroyed my marriage forever. I never thought I'd be the kind of woman who'd end up writing a story like this. Honestly, if you had asked me a year ago, I would have laughed in your face. I was the wife who thought she had it all, a loving husband, a stable home, and a future that looked certain. But certainty has a funny way of slipping through your fingers the moment you start taking it for granted. The night everything began unraveling wasn't loud. It wasn't even dramatic. There were no slammed doors, no screaming matches, no shattered plates across the kitchen floor. It was quiet, eerily quiet, the kind of silence that feels heavier than shouting. I had just slipped into bed, wearing the same soft cotton nightshirt I'd worn countless times. My husband, Daniel, was already sitting up with a book propped against his knees, glasses perched low on his nose. The bedside lamp cast a warm glow on him, and for a moment, I thought about how familiar this scene was, how safe it had always felt, but that night, I needed more than safety. I needed closeness. I needed him. I slid closer, rested my hand on his arm, and whispered, "Hey. You could put that down for a while." He didn't even look at me. He just turned a page and muttered, "Not tonight." I tried to laugh it off. "Okay, then what about tomorrow?" That's when he looked up, his expression as flat as a wall. "Not tonight. Not tomorrow. Not any night. I'm done." At first, I thought I had misheard him. My brain refused to process it. "What do you mean, done?" I asked, my voice cracking. He closed the book, set it on the nightstand, and said it again, slower this time, like he wanted each word to sink in. "I mean, I don't want this anymore. Not tonight, not any night. I'm done with all of that." My heart plummeted. I sat there staring at him, waiting for the punchline, waiting for him to smirk and say he was kidding. But he didn't. He just switched off the lamp, rolled over, and left me lying there in the dark with nothing but my own racing thoughts. That was the moment something inside me cracked. The next morning, Daniel was acting like nothing had happened. He made coffee, scrolled through his phone, and kissed me on the cheek before leaving for work. It was surreal, like I had dreamed the whole thing. But I hadn't. His words kept echoing in my head, "Not tonight. Not any night. I'm done." It wasn't just about sex. It was about intimacy, connection, the small moments that remind you you're more than just roommates. We'd been drifting apart for months, but hearing him declare it so coldly, it was like he had drawn a line in the sand. At first, I tried to convince myself it was stress. He'd been working late a lot, complaining about deadlines and coworkers. Maybe it was just burnout. But deep down, I knew better. Daniel wasn't just tired. He had checked out. To understand how devastating that moment was, you need to know where we started. Daniel and I met in college. He was the quiet guy who always sat in the back of the lecture hall, scribbling notes like the world was ending. I was the chatty one, the girl who could never keep her hand down in class. We were opposites in every sense, but maybe that's why it worked. He grounded me, and I brought him out of his shell. Our first date was nothing fancy, a cheap pizza place near campus, but it felt magical. He listened to me like no one ever had before. When he smiled, it wasn't the polite kind, it was the kind that made his eyes crinkle and his whole face light up. I fell fast, and I fell hard. We married young, maybe too young, but at the time, it felt like the most natural thing in the world. Our wedding wasn't extravagant, but it was filled with laughter and love. For years, people told us we were the perfect couple. And honestly, I believed it, which is why, sitting there in bed that night, staring at the man I thought I knew better than anyone, I felt like I had been sucker punched. The days that followed were strange. Daniel kept his distance, both physically and emotionally. He buried himself in work, came home late, and when he did speak to me, it was about bills, errands, or household chores. We weren't partners anymore. We were just two people coexisting under the same roof. I tried to fix it. God knows I tried. I planned little date nights, cooked his favorite meals. Even bought new lingerie to surprise him. Each attempt was met with indifference. Sometimes he'd mumble thanks without looking up from his laptop. Other times, he'd shrug me off completely. I felt invisible. And when you feel invisible long enough, you start craving anyone who will actually see you. That's when I made the mistake that changed everything. It started innocently enough. I was at work, eating lunch in the break room, when Eric from accounting sat down across from me. Eric wasn't particularly attractive, at least not in the conventional sense, but he was funny. He had this way of making even the most boring office gossip sound entertaining. That day, he noticed I wasn't myself. "You look like someone stole your sunshine," he said, half joking. I laughed, but it came out hollow. "Something like that." He tilted his head, studying me in a way Daniel hadn't in months. "Well, if you ever need someone to talk to. I've been told I give mediocre advice but excellent coffee recommendations." I smiled, and for the first time in weeks, I actually felt noticed. I told myself it was harmless. Just a coworker being nice. But deep down, I knew I was teetering on the edge of something dangerous, and once you step close enough to the edge, it doesn't take much to fall. That night, I went home and tried one last time with Daniel. I asked him to sit with me, just to talk, just to tell me what was going on in his head. He brushed me off again, saying he was tired, lying in bed alone. I thought about Eric's words, his smile, the way he actually looked at me. It was intoxicating. And in that moment, I realized something terrifying. I was more excited about a 5-minute conversation with a coworker than I was about the man I had promised forever to. That was the moment the lines blurred. That was the moment I stopped being just a neglected wife and started becoming something else entirely. The morning after my last failed attempt to reach Daniel, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror, toothbrush dangling from my lips, and really looked at myself. My eyes were swollen from crying, my skin looked dull, and there was a heaviness around my face that no amount of makeup could hide. I didn't recognize the woman staring back at me. Once upon a time, Daniel used to look at me like I was the most beautiful woman in the world. Even on my worst days when I was in sweatpants, hair in a messy bun, and chocolate stains on my shirt, grin and call me gorgeous. But now? I could walk past him in a cocktail dress, perfume trailing behind me, and he wouldn't even blink. That realization hurt more than anything. At work, Eric noticed. He noticed everything. "Rough night?" he asked as we passed in the hallway. I forced a smile. "You could say that." He gave me this half-smirk, half-sympathetic look and said, "You know, I think you're carrying the whole office on your shoulders. You should let someone else handle the stress for once." It was such a simple statement, but it felt like a lifeline. Someone was telling me it was okay not to be perfect, not to keep everything together all the time. Daniel used to tell me that. He used to be my soft place to land. But now, that place was cold and closed off. At first, I kept things with Eric light. I convinced myself it was harmless. He'd stop by my desk to crack a joke, or we'd sit together during lunch breaks. He made me laugh, and laughter felt like oxygen, but slowly, the conversations shifted. Instead of office gossip, he asked about my weekends. Instead of commenting on the weather, he asked about my dreams, my fears, the things that kept me up at night. He paid attention, not just to the words I said but the way I said them. One afternoon, while I was venting about a particularly bad fight with Daniel, Eric leaned across the table and said softly, "You deserve better than feeling like an afterthought." My heart stuttered. No one had ever said that to me. And for the first time in a long time, I wondered if maybe he was right. The guilt came immediately after. I went home that night and sat in the driveway for 20 minutes, staring at the front door, dreading walking inside. Daniel was already on the couch, eyes glued to the TV. I sat down next to him, hoping he'd at least notice my presence. He didn't. He just reached for the remote, changed the channel, and muttered something about work. I wanted to scream. I wanted to shake him and say, "Do you even see me anymore?" Do you even care? But I didn't. I just sat there in silence, the words burning in my throat, and that silence pushed me closer to Eric. The first time I crossed the line was so subtle, it almost didn't feel real. Eric and I were leaving the office late one evening. The parking lot was nearly empty, the sun dipping low on the horizon. We walked side by side, our conversation drifting between jokes and serious confessions. As we reached our cars, I shivered. The air had turned cold, and I hadn't brought a jacket. Without hesitation, Eric shrugged off his coat and draped it over my shoulders. "Can't have you freezing out here," he said with a smile. It was such a small gesture, but the warmth of that coat wasn't just physical. It was attention, care, and intimacy, everything I'd been starving for at home. I should have taken the coat off immediately, thanked him politely, and walked away. But I didn't. I pulled it tighter around me and breathed in the faint scent of his cologne. That night, I fell asleep with the coat still hanging on the back of my chair, and for the first time in weeks, I dreamed instead of cried. The next day, I told myself it was nothing. Just kindness. But deep down, I knew I had crossed a line, not physically, but emotionally. And sometimes, emotional affairs cut deeper than physical ones. Eric began texting me outside of work. At first, it was harmless, memes, funny articles, inside jokes. Then it shifted. Late night, "How are you really doing?" Messages. Good morning texts before Daniel even said a word to me. I found myself checking my phone constantly, waiting for the little buzz that meant Eric was thinking of me. The anticipation was addictive, intoxicating, and Daniel noticed. One night, as I sat on the couch, phone in hand, Daniel looked over and asked flatly, "Who are you smiling at?" My stomach lurched. I quickly locked my phone. "Just a friend," I said too quickly. He narrowed his eyes but didn't press. Instead, he turned back to the TV, as if the conversation wasn't worth the effort. And somehow, that hurt more than if he'd accused me outright. The turning point came on a Friday evening. Daniel had cancelled yet another dinner plan, claiming he was too exhausted. I sat alone at the table, staring at the meal I'd spent an hour preparing, tears stinging my eyes. Out of habit, I picked up my phone and texted Eric. "Guess I'm eating alone again tonight." He responded instantly, "Not if you don't want to. Come meet me. Just coffee. Nothing serious." My heart pounded. I knew what it meant, what it could lead to. But I was tired of being alone, tired of feeling like a ghost in my own marriage. I grabbed my keys. The cafe was quiet, dimly lit, the kind of place that made secrets feel safe. Eric was already there, waiting at a corner table. When he saw me, his whole face lit up, not just his eyes, but everything. It was the kind of smile Daniel hadn't given me in years. We talked for hours. About work, about life, about the aching loneliness I couldn't shake. Eric listened, really listened, like my words mattered. At some point, my hand brushed against his on the table. I froze, waiting for him to pull away. But he didn't. His fingers curled around mine, firm and warm. That touch was electric. It was the spark I had been craving, the validation I had been starving for, and in that moment, I knew I was standing on the edge of a cliff. I could still turn back. I could still walk away. But I didn't. When I got home that night, Daniel was asleep on the couch, TV still blaring. I stood there, staring at him, wondering how we had gone from being soulmates to strangers. I should have felt guilty. I should have felt shame. But instead, I felt alive, and that was the most dangerous feeling of all. The night after coffee with Eric, I barely slept. I kept replaying the way his hand had closed around mine, the warmth of his touch, the unspoken promise lingering between us. It wasn't a kiss, it wasn't sex, but it was something. Something that shattered the illusion of innocence I had been clinging to. I told myself it was just a moment. A lapse. A mistake I wouldn't repeat. But even as I lay in bed next to Daniel, listening to his steady breathing, I knew I was lying to myself, because deep down, I wanted more. Over the next week, things escalated quickly. The texts with Eric became constant, flowing from morning to midnight. We weren't just coworkers anymore, we were confidants, partners in a secret world no one else knew about. At work, we found excuses to linger in the break room together, to share stolen glances during meetings. Every touch, every shared smile felt electric. It was like being 16 again, swept up in the dizzy rush of first love, but it was more than that. It was validation, attention, desire, the very things I'd been begging for from Daniel and never received. And then came the night when everything finally tipped over the edge. Daniel had cancelled yet another dinner plan, choosing instead to work late at the office. I didn't even bother cooking. I just sat at the kitchen table with a glass of wine, staring at the empty chair across from me. My phone buzzed. It was Eric. I can't stop thinking about last week. Can I see you tonight? My heart slammed against my ribs. I knew what he meant. This wasn't about coffee. This wasn't about conversation. I should have said no. I should have deleted the message and turned off my phone. But instead, I typed back the word that sealed my fate: yes. We met at a small hotel on the outskirts of town. I remember sitting in the car in the parking lot, hands gripping the steering wheel. Every nerve in my body screaming at me to turn around, but then I saw him, standing near the entrance, his eyes scanning the lot until they found mine. And when they did, he smiled, the kind of smile that told me he wanted me, that I mattered, that I wasn't invisible. I walked toward him, my legs trembling, my mind a whirlwind of guilt and anticipation. Inside the room, everything happened so fast and yet in slow motion. The door clicked shut behind us. His hands found mine, pulling me close. And before I could even think about what I was doing, his lips were on mine. It was like setting fire to dry wood, instant, uncontrollable, consuming. For months, maybe years, I had been starving. And suddenly, here was a feast laid out before me. I wish I could say I resisted. I wish I could say I thought of Daniel, of our vows, of the life we had built together. But in that moment, all I thought about was how good it felt to finally be wanted. When it was over, I lay there in the dim light of the hotel room, the sheets tangled around us, my chest heaving with both exhilaration and dread. Eric traced circles on my arm and whispered, "You don't know how long I've wanted this." And I smiled. But deep inside, the guilt was already clawing its way up my throat. Driving home that night was the longest drive of my life. Every red light, every street lamp, felt like it was exposing me. By the time I pulled into the driveway, I was shaking. Daniel was asleep again, sprawled on the couch, laptop still open beside him. I stood there in the doorway, staring at him. My heart twisting with guilt. He looked so peaceful, so oblivious. And for a moment, I almost confessed. I almost shook him awake and begged for forgiveness before the lie could take root, but I didn't. Instead, I kissed his forehead gently, whispered "I love you," and went to bed. And that was the night I became someone I never thought I could be, a cheater. The days that followed were a blur of contradictions. With Daniel, I played the role of the dutiful wife, cooking meals, folding laundry, asking about his day. With Eric, I was someone else entirely, bold, desired, alive. The contrast was intoxicating. And terrifying. Every time my phone buzzed, my heart leapt. Every secret meeting, every stolen kiss, made me feel both powerful and guilty. I was living two lives, and the line between them was becoming harder to keep straight. And then Daniel noticed. One evening, as I was getting ready for bed, Daniel leaned against the doorway, arms crossed. "You've been different lately," he said slowly. My heart skipped a beat. "Different how?" He shrugged. "I don't know. Happier. Distracted. Smiling at your phone all the time." Panic surged through me, but I forced a laugh. "Is it such a crime to be in a good mood?" He didn't laugh. He just studied me with that quiet intensity one had fallen in love with years ago. For a second, I thought he knew. I thought the truth was written all over my face, but then he sighed, muttered "never mind," and walked away. Relief flooded me, but it was temporary. Because if Daniel had noticed, it was only a matter of time before the facade cracked completely. And yet, despite the danger, I couldn't stop. the affair with Eric consumed me. The late-night texts, the secret meetings, the excuses, I was drowning in them. Part of me wanted out, wanted to end it before it destroyed everything. But another part of me clung to it desperately, afraid of going back to the emptiness I had with Daniel. It was like standing on a burning bridge, too afraid to run forward, too terrified to run back, and deep down, I knew the fire was going to catch up to me eventually. The more I told myself I'd stop, the deeper I sank. What started as an emotional lifeline had turned into a full-blown affair. One that consumed my thoughts from the moment I woke up until I fell asleep. Eric had become more than just a distraction. He was an addiction. Every text from him sent adrenaline rushing through my veins. Every secret meeting felt like oxygen after months of suffocating. I would walk into his arms and forget, even if only for a few hours, that my marriage was falling apart. But addictions come with consequences. And mine was starting to show. Daniel wasn't stupid. At first, his suspicion was subtle. He'd glance at my phone when it buzzed, his brow furrowing slightly. He'd ask casual questions about my day, about who I'd been with. I brushed it off easily at first. Just work. Just friends. Lies rolled off my tongue with terrifying ease, but the more I lied, the more paranoid I became. I started deleting texts, erasing call logs, making sure to shower immediately after seeing Eric. I told myself it was just precaution, but the truth was, I was terrified. Terrified that Daniel would find out, terrified that the fragile walls of my double life would collapse, and yet, I couldn't stop. One Saturday afternoon, Daniel suggested we go out, just the two of us. Dinner, maybe a movie. It had been months since he'd made any attempt to connect, and for a moment, hope flickered inside me. Maybe this was it. Maybe he was finally ready to fight for us. I agreed eagerly. But when the evening came, Daniel canceled at the last minute, muttering something about work deadlines. I stood in the kitchen, staring at the table I had set for two, rage and despair bubbling inside me. And in that vulnerable moment, I did exactly what I shouldn't have. I texted Eric. Within an hour, I was in his arms again, my husband's broken promises drowned out by the attention I craved so desperately. The guilt afterward was suffocating. I lay in bed next to Daniel that night, the scent of Eric's cologne still clinging faintly to my skin. I wanted to confess, to scream the truth just to get it out of me, but when I looked at Daniel, his tired eyes, the dark circles from endless late nights at work, I froze. Was I really going to add this betrayal to the weight he was already carrying? So I stayed silent, and silence became my prison. The affair wasn't just physical anymore. It had bled into every part of my life. At work, Eric and I would exchange glances across the office. Tiny sparks that no one else noticed. At lunch, he'd slip his hand onto mine under the table, hidden from view but burning with meaning. Outside of work, we found more excuses to meet: quick coffees, late-night drives, stolen hours in hotel rooms. Every time I told myself it was the last, that I would end it tomorrow, but tomorrow never came. Daniel's suspicion grew. One night, as I was brushing my teeth, he appeared in the doorway, arms crossed. "Who have you been texting so much lately?" My hand froze mid-motion. Foam dripped down my chin as I tried to play it off. "Just coworkers. You know how chaotic things have been at the office." He didn't look convinced. "Funny. I thought you hated most of your coworkers." I forced a laugh. "Not all of them." The look he gave me lingered long after he walked away. It wasn't anger, not yet. It was something worse, doubt, and once doubt takes root, it doesn't go away. The tension at home became unbearable. Daniel was distant but watchful, like he was trying to piece together a puzzle with half the pieces missing. I, in turn, became hyper-aware of everything: what time I came home, how often I smiled at my phone, how carefully I hid the evidence. Our conversations grew shorter, sharper. Every word felt like it carried hidden meaning, a test I was bound to fail, and through it all, Eric kept pulling me deeper. "Leave him," he whispered one night as we lay tangled in hotel sheets. "You don't need him. You deserve better. You deserve me." The words sent a chill through me. Part of me wanted to believe him. Part of me wanted to run, to start over with someone who actually saw me. But another part of meth part that still remembered who Daniel and I had been clung desperately to the hope that maybe, just maybe, we could fix this. The breaking point came one evening when Daniel came home early. I was in the living room, phone in hand, mid-text with Eric. I didn't hear the door open, didn't hear his footsteps until he was standing right behind me. "Who are you smiling at?" he asked, his voice low and steady. My blood turned to ice. I locked the phone so quickly it must have looked suspicious. "Just a friend," I stammered. Daniel's eyes narrowed. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then he turned and walked into the kitchen without another word, but I knew. I knew the doubt had turned into something darker. That night, lying in bed, I stared at the ceiling and wondered how long I could keep this up. The lies, the secrets, the constant fear of being caught, it was eating me alive, but the thought of ending it with Eric felt unbearable. He had become my escape, my sanctuary, my proof that I was still desirable, still wanted. I was trapped in a cage of my own making, and every way out looked like destruction. One evening, after another fight with Daniel about nothing and everything, I found myself driving aimlessly, tears streaming down my face. Without thinking, I ended up at Eric's apartment. He opened the door, concern etched across his face, and pulled me into his arms. "I can't do this anymore," I sobbed into his chest. "The lying, the sneaking around, it's tearing me apart." "Then don't," he whispered, stroking my hair. "Be with me. For real." His words hung in the air, heavy and dangerous. For the first time, the possibility of leaving Daniel didn't feel like a distant fantasy. It felt real, tangible, and terrifying. Eric's words haunted me. "Be with me. For real." They echoed in my head during the quiet moments at work, while I washed dishes at home, even as I lay beside Daniel at night. It was the first time someone had dared to put into words what I hadn't admitted to myself, that I was living two lives, and eventually I would have to choose one. But how could I? Daniel was my husband, my history, my safe place even if it had become cold and distant. Eric was my passion, my escape, my proof that I was still alive. Choosing either meant losing a piece of myself, and the cracks between those two worlds were starting to widen. Daniel had become more vigilant. He started asking more questions, subtle at first, then sharper. "Why are you working late so often? Who keeps texting you this late at night? Why don't you want to spend weekends together anymore?" I tried to keep my answers casual, breezy, believable. But no matter how convincing I thought I sounded, I could feel his eyes on me, weighing every word, searching for the truth beneath the lies. It terrified me. And yet, part of me was relieved. At least he noticed. At least he still cared enough to question me, but the relief was fleeting. Because suspicion is not love, it's the shadow love casts when trust has died. Meanwhile, Eric was growing impatient. Every time we were together, he pressed harder. "You deserve better than this half-life," he'd say. "Don't waste another year on a man who doesn't see you. Leave him. Be with me." I would tell him I wasn't ready, that it was complicated, that I needed more time. And he would nod, kiss me, and say he understood. But I could feel his frustration simmering beneath the surface. He wanted all of me. And I couldn't give it, not yet. One evening, Daniel came home earlier than usual. I was in the kitchen, phone buzzing in my hand with another message from Eric. "When are you going to tell him?" I jumped as Daniel's voice came from behind me. "Who's texting you so much these days?" My fingers fumbled, nearly dropping the phone. "Just a friend from work." Daniel stepped closer, his eyes narrowing. "Which friend? Why does it matter?" I snapped, more defensive than I intended. His jaw clenched. For a moment, I thought he was going to grab the phone from my hand. Instead, he turned and walked out of the kitchen, leaving me shaking in the silence. But the look he gave me before he left told me everything. He didn't believe me. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, my mind spinning. Daniel's suspicion was growing too strong to ignore. If I wasn't careful, everything would come crashing down. I thought about ending things with Eric. telling him we couldn't see each other anymore, that it had gone too far. But the next morning, when I saw him waiting for me in the parking lot, his smile warm and his arms open, all my resolve crumbled. I melted into his embrace, and in that moment, I didn't care about consequences. I just cared about how alive I felt. The double life became unbearable. At home, I was tense, careful, watching every word and every movement. At work or in stolen moments with Eric, I was free, reckless, someone entirely different. But the weight of the lies was crushing me. One evening, Daniel sat me down at the dining table. His voice was calm, but his eyes were sharp. "Are you seeing someone else?" he asked. The air left my lungs. For a split second, I considered telling the truth, letting the words spill out and finally ending the torture of secrecy. But fear won. "No," I said firmly. "Of course not. Why would you even think that?" Daniel studied me for a long moment, then leaned back in his chair. "Because you're not here anymore. Your body's in this house, but your heart's somewhere else. And I can feel it." His words cut deeper than any accusation could have. I ran to the bathroom, locked the door, and cried into my hands. He was right. My heart was somewhere else. But the worst part was, I didn't know how to get it back. The next time I saw Eric, I told him about the conversation. He asked me outright if I was cheating. I whispered, panic lacing my words. Eric didn't look surprised. Instead, he cupped my face in his hands and said, "All the more reason to leave him. Before he finds out. Before this turns into a disaster." I pulled away, shaking my head. "You don't understand. I can't just walk away from my marriage like it means nothing." His expression darkened. "So what? You're going to keep sneaking around forever? How long do you think you can juggle both of us before it all blows up?" His bluntness stung, but deep down, I knew he was right. The walls of my double life were closing in. Daniel's suspicion was boiling over. Eric's patience was wearing thin. And I was caught in the middle, terrified of losing both, yet unable to choose either. One night, as I sat in the darkened living room, phone buzzing in my hand with another message from Eric, I heard Daniel's footsteps behind me. "Who is it?" he asked quietly. My heart froze. I looked up at him, his eyes searching mine, waiting for an answer, and in that moment, I realized the truth was about to come out whether I was ready or not. When Daniel asked me, "Who is it?" that night, I felt the world tilt beneath my feet. I swallowed hard, forcing a shaky smile. "It's just a friend, Daniel. Stop making it into something it's not." But the look in his eyes told me he didn't believe a word. For the first time since our marriage began, I felt afraid of him, not because I thought he'd hurt me, but because I realized he was finally awake. The man who had spent months distant, distracted, detached, was now watching me with razor-sharp focus, and that was far more dangerous than his neglect had ever been. The days that followed were suffocating. Daniel became different. Not angry, not explosive. Quiet. Calculating. He started asking specific questions. "What time did you leave work yesterday? Who's Eric? I saw his name pop up on your phone." The first time he said Eric's name out loud, my blood ran cold. I tried to laugh it off. "Eric's just a coworker, Daniel. Why are you acting like a jealous teenager?" But inside, panic clawed at me. How did he know Eric's name? Had he gone through my phone? The answer came sooner than I expected. One morning, as I was getting ready, I noticed my phone wasn't where I'd left it on the nightstand. My chest tightened. "Daniel, have you seen my phone?" I called from the bathroom. A pause. Then his voice, flat and unconvincing. "No." When I finally found it tucked under the couch cushion hours later, the pit in my stomach confirmed everything. He had looked, and if he had looked once, he would look again. That night, Eric and I met at the hotel again. My nerves were frayed, my hands trembling as I clutched the sheets. "He's on to me," I whispered. "I think he went through my phone." Eric's jaw tightened. "Then it's only a matter of time. You need to decide, now." I shook my head, tears brimming. "I can't just leave. It's not that simple." "Yes, it is. His voice was sharp, impatient. You stay with a man who doesn't love you, or you come with me. But you can't keep both. So which is it? His ultimatum hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. I didn't answer. I couldn't. Back at home, Daniel's suspicion had turned into surveillance. He started checking the mileage on my car. Asking about receipts. Noticing inconsistencies in my stories. Every lie became harder to maintain. Every detail I forgot became a potential crack in the facade, and yet, even with the walls closing in, I couldn't bring myself to let go of Eric, because the truth was, I didn't want to. One night, I came home later than usual. Daniel was waiting in the kitchen. Arms crossed, his expression unreadable. Long day? He asked casually. Too casually, I nodded, forcing a smile. Yeah. Lots of work piled up. He tilted his head. Funny. I called your office. They said you left hours ago. My heart stopped. I opened my mouth, searching desperately for an excuse, but none came. The silence stretched between us, heavy and damning. Finally, Daniel shook his head, a bitter smile curling on his lips. I don't even know why I ask anymore. You'll never tell me the truth. Then he walked past me, the slam of the bedroom door echoing like a gunshot. I collapsed onto the couch, trembling, guilt and fear churning in my stomach. For the first time, I wondered if this was the beginning of the end. The next day, Eric cornered me in the parking lot after work. You need to stop stringing me along, he said, his voice low but urgent. I'm not going to be your dirty little secret forever. I'm not stringing you along, I whispered, glancing around nervously. I need time. You've had time, he shot back. Every day you go home to him, you're choosing him. And if that's what you want, fine. But don't expect me to keep waiting. His words stung. Because deep down, I knew he was right. That night, I couldn't eat. I sat at the dinner table, pushing food around my plate while Daniel scrolled through his phone in silence. The gulf between us was wider than ever, a chasm I didn't know how to cross. Finally, Daniel looked up. Do you even want to be here anymore? The question sliced through me. Because I didn't know the answer, I went to bed early, but sleep wouldn't come. My mind was a storm. Daniel's suspicion, Eric's ultimatum, my own guilt pressing down like a weight I couldn't carry. At some point, I slipped out of bed and sat on the bathroom floor, staring at my reflection in the mirror. I didn't recognize the woman looking back at me. She was a liar. A cheater. A coward, and yet, she was still me. By the end of that week, I knew something had to give. Either Daniel would discover the truth on his own, or Eric would walk away, leaving me hollow and alone. I was running out of time, running out of lies. The walls were closing in, and sooner or later, they were going to crush me. Daniel had always been predictable. That was one of the things I used to love about him, was steady, dependable, the kind of man who never acted out of impulse. But in the weeks after his suspicions grew, that steadiness turned into something else. Something sharper. More deliberate. He wasn't just watching me anymore. He was hunting me. It started small. I noticed him glancing at my phone when it buzzed on the counter. He began checking the time whenever I said I was running errands. His questions became less casual, more pointed, but then the little things escalated. One afternoon, I left work late and saw Daniel's car parked across the street from the building. My blood turned to ice. He was watching me. I didn't let on that I saw him. Instead, I walked calmly to my car, heart pounding, every nerve screaming that the net was tightening. When I told Eric, he wasn't surprised. He knows, Eric said flatly. Even if he doesn't have proof, he knows. And the longer you wait, the worse this will be when it all blows up. I buried my face in my hands. I can't just leave him. We've been married for years. We've built a life together. Eric's expression hardened. A life that makes you miserable. You're lying to him, lying to yourself, lying to me. How long do you think you can juggle this before it destroys you? I didn't answer, because the truth was, I had no idea. That night, Daniel confronted me again. Where were you this evening? His tone was deceptively calm, but his eyes burned. I told you, I said, forcing a steady voice. I stayed late at work. He leaned forward, elbows on the table, studying me like a suspect under interrogation. Funny. I called your office. No one saw you after 5. My heart slammed against my ribs. I scrambled for words, excuses, anything but my silence betrayed me. Daniel shook his head. A bitter laugh escaping his lips. You really think I'm stupid, don't you? I wanted to scream, to confess, to beg for forgiveness, but the words lodged in my throat like shards of glass. Over the next week, Daniel's suspicion turned into obsession. He started checking my car when I came home, touching the hood to see if it was warm, looking at the odometer. He even went through my purse once, though he didn't admit it. Every moment felt like walking through a minefield, and yet, in the middle of that danger, I still ran to Eric, because no matter how high the stakes got, being with him felt worth it. One evening, Eric grabbed my hands and looked at me with desperation. Enough is enough, he said. Leave him. Tonight. Pack a bag and come with me. Tears filled my eyes. I can't. Yes, you can. His voice cracked with urgency. If you wait for him to find out, it'll be a disaster. End it before he does. Choose me before he takes the choice away. I shook my head violently, panic clawing at me. You don't understand. If I walk away, everything falls apart. My family, my friends, my whole life. Eric pulled back, frustration blazing in his eyes. Then maybe you've already made your choice. Those words sliced me open, because maybe I had. That weekend, Daniel was quieter than ever. He barely spoke, barely looked at me. But I could feel the tension radiating off him, thick and suffocating. At one point, I caught him staring at me across the living room. His jaw clenched, his fists tight. What? I snapped, my nerves fraying. His voice was low, dangerous. I'll find out. Whatever it is you're hiding, I'll find it. The certainty in his tone chilled me to the bone. I started deleting every message from Eric the second it appeared. I changed his name in my phone to Maya, pretending it was a female coworker. I parked 2 streets away from our meeting spots so Daniel couldn't track my car, but paranoia grew like a wildfire. What if Daniel followed me one night? What if he asked Maya and she accidentally revealed something? What if I couldn't breathe the one evening I told Eric I needed space? I can't keep doing this, I whispered. I feel like I'm being watched every second. Eric's face hardened. So what are you saying? That you're choosing him? I don't know. I cried. I don't know what I'm doing anymore. He shook his head, disgust flashing across his features. You can't keep stringing me along. Either you're with me, or you're not. Then he walked away, leaving me standing in the dark, torn in two. Back at home, Daniel was waiting. He didn't ask questions this time. Didn't raise his voice. He just looked at me, his eyes hollow, and said, "One day, you're going to tell me the truth. And when you do, don't expect me to forgive you." I wanted to deny, to protest, to scream that he was wrong, but for the first time, I didn't, because I knew he was right. That night, I lay awake, heart pounding, the walls of my double life closing in tighter than ever. I had run out of excuses, out of lies, out of time, and I knew sooner rather than later everything was going to explode. I always thought I was good at lying, not because I was proud of it, but because Daniel used to trust me so completely that I never had to try very hard. But by then, I could feel it slipping. Every excuse sounded weaker, every story shakier. Daniel's silence was no longer ignorancy, it was strategy. He was waiting, watching, collecting. And I was running out of time. It started with the receipts. One evening, I came home to find a small pile laid neatly on the kitchen table. Gas stations 2 towns over, restaurant tabs, hotel charges. My stomach twisted into knots. Do you recognize these? Daniel asked, his voice calm but cold. I swallowed hard, forcing a laugh. I don't know, maybe they mixed my card up at work? That happens sometimes, don't. His voice snapped like a whip. Don't insult me with another lie. I froze, my breath caught in my throat. He didn't yell. He didn't scream. That almost made it worse. The quiet, seething disappointment in his eyes felt heavier than rage ever could. I'll get the truth, he said finally. With or without you. Then he walked away, leaving me trembling in the kitchen, the receipts staring up at me like evidence in a trial. Eric wasn't much better. When I told him about Daniel's discoveries, he shook his head. This is what I've been warning you about. He's circling, and soon he'll catch you. You can't keep playing both sides. I need a little more time, I whispered desperately. Eric's face hardened. No. Time's up. Either you leave him, or I walk away. The ultimatum sat between us like a ticking bomb. I opened my mouth to respond, but no words came. Because I didn't know what I wanted. Not really. That weekend, Daniel's vigilance escalated. He checked the bank accounts daily. He started tracking my location through an app I'd forgotten we even had on our phones, and then worst of all, found a small GPS tracker hidden under my car. When I confronted him, he didn't deny it. What else was I supposed to do? He asked coldly. You won't tell me the truth, so I'll find it myself. The betrayal in his voice was almost unbearable. But I couldn't exactly blame him. I was betraying him in ways far worse than he could imagine. The pressure crushed me from both sides. At home, Daniel's quiet investigation. At work, Eric's growing impatience. Every text from Eric felt like a demand. Every silence from Daniel felt like judgment. I was suffocating. One night, after another heated exchange with Eric, I sat alone in the car, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. What was I doing? How had I gotten here? I thought back to the girl I used to beta, one who believed in forever, who promised to love Daniel through everything. That girl was gone. In her place was someone I didn't recognize. Someone who lied, cheated, and couldn't even choose between two men, but the choice was coming, whether I wanted it or not, because Daniel was closing in. The breaking point came on a Tuesday evening. I walked through the door and froze. On the coffee table sat my phone, unlocked, with every message between Eric and me pulled up. Daniel stood across the room, arms folded, eyes burning with betrayal. My blood ran cold. Care to explain? He asked quietly. My mouth went dry. I opened it, closed it, opened it again, but no sound came. He let out a bitter laugh, shaking his head. I knew it. I knew it all along. And you just kept lying. Tears blurred my vision. Daniel, please, don't, he snapped. Don't you dare try to spin this. I have the proof. I don't want excuses. I want the truth. And for the first time, I couldn't deny it anymore. The walls I had built with lies and half-truths collapsed in an instant. Yes, I whispered, my voice breaking. I've been seeing someone. The words felt like poison on my tongue. Daniel's face went pale, like the life had been drained from him. Who? He demanded. I hesitated. But his glare cut through me, demanding honesty I could no longer withhold. Eric, I whispered, his jaw clenched, fury flashing across his features. He turned away, pacing the room like a caged animal. When he finally spoke, his voice shook with rage. Do you have any idea what you've done to me? To us? Tears streamed down my face. I'm sorry. I didn't mean. You didn't mean? He whirled on me, eyes blazing. You didn't mean to destroy our marriage? You didn't mean to make me feel like a fool? I broke down completely, sobs racking my body, but Daniel didn't comfort me. He didn't even look at me, he just grabbed his keys, muttered, I can't even look at you right now, and stormed out the door. I collapsed onto the floor, trembling, my whole body shaking with the weight of what had just happened. It was over. The secret was out, and nothing would ever be the same again. When Daniel walked out that night, I thought he'd come back in a few hours, that maybe despite everything still want to talk, but he didn't come back, not that night. Not the next morning. His side of the bed stayed cold, and with each passing hour, the silence in our house grew heavier, more suffocating. He finally returned on the second evening. I was sitting on the couch, sleepless, still in the same clothes from the night before. When I heard the door open, I jumped to my feet, relief and dread colliding inside me. Daniel, don't. His voice was sharp, cutting. He dropped a duffel bag on the floor. I only came to get some things. My throat tightened. Please, can we just— There's nothing to talk about, he interrupted, his eyes hard. You made your choice. Now I'm making mine. It felt like the air was being sucked out of my lungs. Daniel, I didn't choose him, I just— Stop lying. He snapped, his voice booming through the room. For a moment, I saw all the hurt and fury he'd been holding back, and it made me flinch. You don't get to have it both ways anymore, he continued, his tone dropping into something colder. You wanted him? Fine. Have him. But you don't get me too. After he left again, I sat in the dark, my whole body shaking. I'd thought I could control this, keep my marriage and my affair balanced like weights on a scale. But the scale had finally tipped and crushed everything underneath. Eric called that night. So, he knows, he said, not even asking, just stating. I swallowed hard. Yes. And? He left. I don't know what he's going to do. There was silence on the other end, then Eric said, Good. That means it's done. Now you and I can finally be together without sneaking around. His words should have comforted me. But instead, they made my stomach churn, because I realized in that moment I wasn't ready to let go of Daniel. The next few days blurred together in a haze of unanswered texts and empty rooms. Daniel stayed away, only returning once to grab more of his clothes. He barely looked at me. At work, I tried to focus, but Eric's presence made it impossible. He cornered me in the break room one afternoon. When are you moving in with me? I froze. I don't know. Eric's jaw tightened. What do you mean you don't know? He's gone. What are you waiting for? Tears burned my eyes. Eric, I didn't think it would happen like this. I'm not ready, not ready? His voice was sharp, accusing. You've been lying to him for months. You've been lying to me too, haven't you? No. I shook my head desperately. I care about you, I do. But this is all happening so fast. Eric stepped closer, his tone low and dangerous. If you walk away from me now, after everything, you'll regret it. I stared at him, my chest tightening. Was this the man I had risked everything for? That night, I sat alone at the kitchen table, staring at the divorce papers Daniel had left in an envelope on the counter. He hadn't said a word, just dropped them off and left. The finality of it hit me like a punch to the gut. This was real. My marriage was ending, and suddenly, Eric didn't feel like a choice. He felt like a consequence. I called him late that night. Eric, I need space, I whispered, my voice trembling. Space? His laugh was sharp, bitter. After everything I've risked for you? I'm sorry, I need to figure things out. You've already figured it out, he snapped. You chose me. Don't back out now. I didn't choose anyone, I said, tears streaming down my face. I don't even know what I want anymore. There was a long pause, then his voice dropped into something cold and unfamiliar. Then maybe you don't deserve either of us. He hung up before I could respond. For the first time since the affair began, I was truly alone. Daniel didn't want me. Eric was furious with me, and all I had left was the hollow echo of my own mistakes. The following days were unbearable. Everywhere I looked, I saw the wreckage of the life I'd destroyed. The framed wedding photo on the wall. The empty spot in the closet where Daniel's clothes used to hang. The silence of a house that had once been full of laughter. Friends started calling, asking why Daniel wasn't around. I dodged their questions, too ashamed to tell them the truth. At night, I lay awake replaying every choice that had led me here. Wondering how I could have been so blind, and yet, despite everything, a part of me still wanted to believe it wasn't too late, that maybe Daniel could forgive me, that maybe I hadn't lost him forever, but deep down, I knew the truth. Some mistakes can't be undone. The envelope sat on the counter for 3 days before I had the courage to open it. inside were the divorce papers. No letter. No explanation. Just a signature line at the bottom where Daniel had already written his name, as though I was nothing more than a contract he was terminating. I stared at the page until my vision blurred. So this was it. The end of us. Daniel came by the next evening to collect the last of his things. I heard his car pull up and my heart raced, hope and dread twisting together in my chest. When he walked in, he didn't even look at me. He just went straight to the bedroom, grabbed the boxes he'd left, and carried them out. "Daniel, please," I begged, following him to the door. "Can we just talk?" He stopped, his back still to me. For a long moment, I thought he would ignore me completely, then he turned, his eyes cold and tired. "What is there left to say?" He asked quietly, tears welled up in my eyes. "That I'm sorry. That I made a mistake. That I still love you." His expression didn't soften. If anything, it hardened. "You don't get to say you love me," he said. "Not after what you did." The finality in his voice shattered me. He walked out, closing the door behind him. And this time, I knew he wasn't coming back. Eric wasn't any better. When I finally answered his calls again, he was furious. "You've been avoiding me," he accused. "I needed time," I whispered. "Time?" He scoffed. "You think you get to just disappear after everything? You promised me you'd leave him. And now you're acting like you're the victim?" I bit back a sob. "Eric, please. I can't do this right now." "No, you listen to me," he snapped. "I'm done waiting. Either you're with me, or we're finished." The ultimatum echoed in my ears. And for the first time, I realized I didn't want either of them. Not Daniel, because I'd destroyed that marriage beyond repair. Not Eric, because he wasn't love, was escape, temptation, selfishness dressed up as romance. I was left with nothing but myself, and the crushing weight of regret. The weeks that followed were the loneliest of my life. Daniel moved into an apartment across town. Friends who had once filled our weekends with dinners and laughter stopped calling when word spread about what I'd done. My own family looked at me with disappointment they didn't bother to hide. Everywhere I went, I carried the scarlet letter of my betrayal, and the worst part? I couldn't blame anyone but myself. One night, weeks after Daniel left for good, I sat alone in the house that had once been our home. I looked around at the photos, the furniture we'd picked out together, the memories embedded in every corner. It hit me that I hadn't just lost my husband, I'd lost the life we built. The future we planned, and all for what? A fling. A few stolen moments of passion that weren't worth a fraction of what I'd destroyed. I thought about reaching out to Daniel, about begging for another chance. But deep down, I knew it wouldn't matter. Some wounds don't heal. Some damage can't be undone, and I had no right to ask him to forgive what I could never forgive myself for. So here I am, months later, telling my story not because I want sympathy, but because I want others to understand. If you're in a marriage and you feel neglected, ignored, unloved, talk. Shout. Fight. Do anything but cheat, because once you cross that line, you can't go back. You can beg for forgiveness. You can cry until your body aches. You can hate yourself for every choice you made, but none of it will rebuild what you burned to the ground. Daniel moved on. Last I heard, he was seeing someone new. She'll never know how lucky she is to have his love. As for Arish, drifted away not long after our last fight. I haven't heard from him since. Maybe he found someone else to chase. Maybe he was never really mine to begin with. It doesn't matter, because in the end, I lost everything, not because of them, because of me.